Hello, 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 and welcome to Conversations. I'm Eliana.
And I'm Patrick. Hi.
And today is Friday, May 23rd. We are at the 11th day of the festival out of 12, and we're joined by Łukasz Mańkowski.
Hello.
Hello. Łukasz has been on the podcast once before, last year, when we talked about the desert of Namibia, caught by the tides.
Wow, it's been a year already.
It's been a year. And so today we thought we'd invite him back to talk about a few of the films in another Asian-flavored sense, because Łukasz programs the Five Flavors Film Festival in Warsaw, among other things.
Among other things, yes.
Yeah, and Łukasz, how has your festival been so far?
It's been surprisingly really nice. I never have high expectations. I never have superimposed anything upon me before I start dealing with competition films. But this year, I think I'm really grateful that I didn't force myself to do all of the films from competition and just focus on something that I knew that will be quite right up my alley. And I liked a lot of films. I just wish I had more time to watch the side sections more. I think I managed to see majority of Asian films selected this year in Cannes throughout the whole sections. Some of them have been quite underwhelming, some maybe not so great, but other than that, I feel that this edition might be one of my favorites in the recent years.
That's a very positive note. And could you perhaps tell us or walk us through about how a Cannes visit affects the festival that you are programming?
Well, in the past years, Cannes wasn't our priority in terms of our programming choices. We thought that Asian cinema selected at Cannes is in a very peculiar limbo, in a sense that usually these are the films that have French money, for instance, French co-productions, and they are somewhat targeted to Western audiences. It's not like we're not saying this is not Asian cinema, but we try to find films that premiere in smaller festivals, films that have a local resonance, and films that otherwise couldn't be able to travel outside of Asia. So we're sort of dealing with more, I guess, local films and films that premiering primarily in Asia and at Asian festivals. But the recent years, we managed to show some of the films from Cannes as well. Like last year, we showed Mongrel, the film that premiered in Cannes, and it got Camera d'Or, I think, for the best debut. This year, we're aiming to show some of the films as well, because we feel that there are some really interesting titles coming from Southeast Asia, for instance, that managed to go to Cannes. And of course, they have huge exposure, but sometimes there are not a lot of films from, for instance, Thailand, Indonesia, that are not present anywhere else, but they just happen to go to Cannes. So for instance, we want to have that film because we believe that in Poland there is no other festival that would be able to give a very holistic exposure to the film, meaning that we can have a filmmaker being present in Warsaw, we can have a Q&A, we can have proper introduction. So we have a lot of attention to knowledge and circulating that, and we really care about films. I'm not trying to say that as something that we're sort of proud about it, but at the same time we believe that there's very distinctive programming style where you just put films in a program and then you can also curate it and do a certain narrative around it. Striving for that, it's not easy, but definitely films from Cannes have not been very easy to take, because everybody wants to take them, right? So it's always a bit of a battle. But this year, I feel like with films like Useful Ghost also being highlighted as the best film from Semaine de la Critique, or a film like Left Hand Girl that was edited by Sean Baker and endorsed by Sean Baker as a production team, also is something that I think there sparks a huge interest around. And I already know that Left Hand Girl was picked up by a Polish distributor, which is very rare for a film like that to be distributed in Poland through a domestic release. So I'm curious how those films gonna resonate, and maybe we'll be able to pick them up for the festival as well.
Yeah, and I think you spoke onto something that is, not to be expected at a festival like Cannes, that is this holistic experience that you're talking about, right? Here it is so difficult to talk to talent, and because everyone wants to talk to certain people more than to others, but overall it's quite difficult to, some PR people don't even respond to certain requests, and here it's all so tight as well. If you're lucky, you get into a press junket or something. So in that respect, I think it's, even for people who may not have heard of Five Flavors before, that's just very enticing to know that you can really get into conversations there.
Yeah, that November in Poland might not be the most exciting thing to do, but if you ever get a chance to come to Warsaw in November, let us know. I mean, the festival is pretty nice in terms of it's a cinephile culture-oriented festival. Eliana was part of our project.
It was one of my favorite festivals.
That's I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, I need to come back.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.
And today we're going to talk about a few films. There are a couple of films in competition that happen to be from Asia. We have Renoir by Chie Hayakawa.
Yeah, Chie Hayakawa.
Yeah.
I just saw her when I was having lunch. She was just having a stroll around Cannes. She's still here, yeah.
And have you interviewed her?
I interviewed her, but 2 years ago when she was in Cannes with Plan 75.
Yes.
This year, I didn't have the chance, unfortunately. But I like the film, actually. So.
And she did receive the Camera d'Or, right? Debut or something.
Yeah.
Is that an indicator that she might get home with some prize here if she's still here, or is it just because the film was relatively late?
I was thinking about it. I think she's also based in France currently, so maybe she's able to just be here. But at the same time, I was thinking it could be like a type of a silent winner, probably some minor award, maybe screenplay or something, I don't know. But we'll see. Definitely it's a film that I resonated with, although I know that not a lot of people share the same feeling about it. I know that a lot of people just felt lost while watching this, or that it was too delicate for them to be able to resonate with the whole story. But if there's an award for it, I would be happy, but I would also be surprised.
Yeah, that's one of the titles I haven't heard much about after it played,
True.
As you said, rather quiet. Perhaps we can also, Eliana, do you want to talk about just your overall festival so far?
Sure. Oh, goodness.
Did you enjoy yourself?
I think this year I also was trying to aim to have a more or less stress-free festival. We had been able to see around 20 or so films before the festival actually started that were in a mixture of the side sections, and then there was one competition film. And I think, today we went into the water for the first time, which it just feels like a big thing.
This is the best competition film.
Yes, this is the best competition film. It's been honestly a mixture of films that have been interesting, but not necessarily doing it for me. Today was actually quite a nice day to sort of finish in general. Tomorrow they're primarily reruns. And today we saw the Kelly Reichardt, The Mastermind. We saw Bi Gan's Resurrection, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
And you watched it in IMAX.
Oh, yes. And we watched it in IMAX because we did that thing again where if you miss the press screening or you miss the world premiere, you can go the next day to the Semaine and try to catch it in a screen that's a bit larger. Yeah. You don't need to squint.
I'm jealous again.
And it's a bit more comfy there as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And of course, we did the obligatory thing in Cannes. We watched a Dardenne Brothers film.
Yes. But this still moved me because it's like we said before, the Dardenne brothers are making films that not many people are making, but it's still a very difficult topic. They're still coming here and premiering, but overall it's always sort of the same in some sense. The first few days feel like, I don't know, like a week have passed, and then before you know it, it's the last 2 days of the festival. You've seen maybe a handful of people, you've caught up sometimes in profound ways, sometimes in slightly superficial ways, in passing. You make a new friend that you sit next to in the theater. Yeah. You learn a new tradition. This year I learned about the tradition of yelling the name Raoul.
Me too.
I didn't even know about
it. And I started to love it.
And did you say it?
Yeah, yesterday, first time for Bi Gan. But the first time I really noticed that was like, because if someone tells you that, I notice. But if it doesn't, it's like, why? It's like
maybe I just thought that because Jakob, who was on the podcast the other time, told us that it might have started with someone wrote about it being, oh, someone's lost their friend Raoul, and another person told me that it was that people would say it only if they already knew beforehand that the film might be good. So I don't know where this goes.
The sound of anticipation.
Yes, and now some people are even looking down at Raoul and going, oh, those people don't know where the origins of Raoul came from.
Yeah, and it reminds me of Toronto, because at TIFF they have this thing. I don't know, it's a bit strange, but yeah.
In Poland, there is this book that just was published just recently. It's written by a very renowned Polish film critic, and he wrote about like all those old traditions or just, I don't know, like habits of Cannes, and also like revealing sort of behind the scene throughout the last 25 years. For a lot of Polish critics, they got to know about the Raoul thing in Debussy through that book. So they also envisioned me why people actually yelled this eponymous name. And just, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Surprise.
And you saying that also reminds me of before this Cannes, because there was this time, I think more than in previous years, there was so much talk about late additions to the festival, and also some people were wondering about, you know, like as always, of course, like, oh, why did that film get into, and what about like the Jim Jarmusch was a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is that film not here? But that just all made me think I would really love to see a documentary about the behind the scenes here. It's of course an impossibility. They cannot do that because it's, you know, as long as this, you know, the same people are in power here, it doesn't make sense because they would expose themselves as well to some degree. But that's something I would love to see at some point.
Unless Hong Sang-soo is making it right now as we speak, because he's part of the jury. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I saw him one day. It was, I think, my first day in Cannes, just walking around 8 a.m. and he was just like having a stroll around the beach. Like really, his face told everything. Like, why I am here. It was fun.
The meme that was circulating of him basically saying, I don't know why I'm here, but maybe he's found his reason, like you suggested. Maybe he's making that film. That'd be very...
Yeah, and even in the press text for his jury duty here, it says that he's working on a film right now, so who knows?
Actually, every day I was walking to Palais in the morning. When I was walking through Croisette, I saw some crew on the beach shooting a film. They were from Asia. I mean, that was not his crew, but it's probably way too bigger for his standards. You know, there's only 15 people around. But there's definitely some film being shot right now. But they were shooting the same exact spot for 3 days or so. So I'm wondering, what's the film about? Definitely there's some water in it.
Yeah, I think if he ever makes a film with 15 people, that's his kind of blockbuster.
Yeah, in a sense, I guess.
And I was thinking, because at some point we should also talk about the movies, right? And you just mentioned the Dardenne brothers, and I have seen one film that I think both of you have not seen, so I thought I can just quickly talk about that. And I actually like the film quite a bit. It's called Lucky Lou by Lloyd Lee Choi, and this is a Korean Canadian director, and this is sort of a Dardenne brothers film which you might think of transposed into New York and with more contemporary sensibilities, perhaps. And yeah, we have something here that we've seen last year at Cannes, which was in the film that won the Fipresci and also Ensemble Regard, the French film Suleiman.
Oh yes, Suleiman's story.
Yeah, we have a similar conceit here, as in we have this delivery bike rider that's at least at the beginning of the scene. He's a Chinese immigrant, has been living in New York for quite some time. But at the beginning of the film, he is not able to do that job anymore. And we have a similar precarity as in Suleiman, that we see that people just assume these identities that are not actually theirs. And then these identities are exchanged for new ones. And there is this sort of black market where you get your sort of license for a limited time. And they're all lining up in the morning. It's a bit like these handy workers at like mid 20th century or before, lining up at the dawn, and then they have a day job. That's a bit what's happening here, but at some point he loses his bike and then he is out of options to make ends meet. We start in an apartment, and that tells us that his family, who he has not seen in quite some time, is going to move to New York the next day or so. And now he finds out that he was also scammed about this apartment, and that the landlord is soon going to kick him out if he's not coming up with a deposit. So it's all very precarious, and we follow him along. And this could be very bleak, as would be very customary for this Cannes, which is as bleak as I've never seen one Cannes edition before. But there is something nice about it, because once his daughter arrives, he has to take care of her as well. So he has to find ways to make money while he is taking her along on the ride. And this sort of, it makes things more poignant, because you understand that she gets more and more of an understanding as well what her dad is actually doing right next to her. We have that often, right? That children are actually more perceptive than you might be willing to grant them. And it's a really good film. I think it's one of the standouts in one of these sidebars. So one of the better films there. And I would be looking forward to the next films of the director. That's Lucky Lou by Lloyd Lee Choi.
That seems to have some very strong echoes of neorealism, of course. Vittorio De Sica's The Bicycle Thief.
For sure, yeah.
For me, it also echoes what it's been going on with Asian American new generations of filmmakers trying to make their films on completely like new ground. And just recently we had a premiere of Left Hand Girl by a filmmaker who previously worked with Sean Baker, and their film Takeout was sort of one of the first scrutinies of reality that is spaced between generations, but also like just revealing a story, like identity story of generation of immigrants in the States. So I think it's always interesting for me as a programmer, not only as a critic. It's always interesting to see what sort of representation come out of this film, to look at those stories that are in between realms, between Asia, between West. I always had a weak sort of like soft spot for that. One of my favorite films is An Autumn's Tale by Mabel Chung from the East. It tells about a story about, it's a migration drama basically. One of the first films talking about diaspora experience set in New York, Chinatown, and with new stories revealing a certain like more modern perspective on the same topic. I'm always like curious, what is the angle? What is like more socially driven? Even Left Hand Girl is a film that it's seemingly similar, because the filmmaker, whose name I forgot, comes back from the States to Taiwan, and you can tell that this perspective is like she's an outsider. She doesn't really,
even though she was born there as well.
Yeah. But she spent a lot of time in the States. She produced films of Sean Baker, including Honora. So there was a huge buzz around this film, and it's clearly there. I mean, the sort of experience that you want to sort of come back to a place and show the beauty of this place to probably the audience that won't be native. It won't be Taiwanese. It's a film that sort of you can have a feeling that's like a lot of things are packed just to show the beauty of the culture. And I know that for a lot of people, they didn't like the film specifically for that reason. But I think those two films might resonate really well, because they give that unique sense of experience that is very particular for both of the filmmakers, because they're somewhat outsiders in their place where they seemingly belong to, right? So I'm always curious about those films.
And there was one thing about Lucky Lou that also reminded me of last year's Blue Sun Palace, which, takes place in New York, but you think, for a long time, that's
perhaps
actually taking place in Taiwan.
Taipei, yeah.
And here there is something similar in the first scene where you start in this apartment, and the person who seems to be the landlord is Chinese or Taiwanese. So they talk, of course, in Mandarin or Taiwanese, I'm not sure, but and then it just reveals itself later that, this is New York City.
Yeah, no, it's especially interesting to me, since in some sense I identify as Asian American as well, and to see this emergence of cinema that neither feels like Asian America is also such a term that encompasses, it's like BIPOC, it's like LGBTQ, AI, etc. It's something that's helpful but not so helpful, because Korean Americans have different experiences than Taiwanese Americans,
or Canadian Americans, Canadian
yes,
Koreans,
exactly.
Yeah.
There's ABC, there's CBC, and to see that in mainstream media, I suppose, with The Farewell and even Crazy Rich Asians, 6-7 years ago already, and now we have I guess, a shift towards some art house-ish films. And then I would also say that my reception of Zhou Shih-Ching, there's something I like about her name because her name comes from like the Zhou dynasty, and then Shi being time and Qing, this particular word means to lift up. But this film made it hard because I could feel the American presence in Left-Handed Girl, and I don't really know what that means because I think it's more about my expectations and what I want to so-called see when I even see a film that's from the East. But it was well edited. It's
very vibrant.
Yes, vibrant production of a film that takes place in the Taiwanese night markets, which if anyone has been to Taipei, they know how vibrant and lively those night markets are, and you can't not go to one, and each one has its own specialty and taste, from the foods that they serve to the types of delicacies, but you do find the same sorts of like cheap toys that are also featured in this film. And Patrick, you really liked the film.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I mean, people who've listened to this podcast know that I like most of Sean Baker's work. And here I think it starts really with the very first scene. It comes with this, what I think is a fantastic soundtrack. It starts with this sort of kaleidoscopic, prismatic images because the protagonist, she watches through this little, I don't even know what this is, but this little toy that makes Taipei flourish even more than it does through all the immensity of colors in this film. And I heard people say this is sort of a mixture of Takeout and the Florida Project, and I can see that. But of course, it's also a bit hard because then you take away so much, credit of the director.
Yeah, I mean, you even said Sean Baker's work to start introducing this film, because I do think it's very hard to divorce Zhou Shih-Ching's work from Baker's work, because she's both been a co-writer or producer or just present on basically all of Baker's projects.
Right. But you can just see, because, we have this credit here with the editing as well, and you can, in that sense, say that this is a Sean Baker edited film. Like, you can really see it. It flows so well, but I would not think that this is a Sean Baker film, like if I saw it. So there is really originality here as well. I think also when it comes to the plot construction, she's doing something that is not common, that would not be common for a Sean Baker film. So I will stop here about Sean Baker, but, just to say she's doing her own thing, and I think for me it has worked quite well. There is a structure to this film that later makes events that occur earlier, you can perceive them in a different light now, knowing what comes later. And I think that can work to the film's detriment, or it can also work for the film's richness. And I think for me it has attributed to the richness of the film. And it just, it has a lot of energy. It has a lot of fun. There's just, we have this animal here as well.
A meerkat.
Yeah, a meerkat. And the way the film uses that, like, I cannot remember a film that introduces an animal in such a cute way and then makes you laugh so hard when this animal disappeared for some reason.
Yeah, like it gets rid of it just randomly, and then like nothing happened, but it's funny how it happens.
Yeah, and I love the humor to it as well. And the night markets, I think, are well captured. There is this sort of necessary figure, I think you would say, for that kind of movie. There's this very nice avuncular figure for the protagonist who runs a stand next to the family who run a noodle shop, basically. And he tries to sell soap and adjacent products to more or less success. And the protagonist, whose name is Yang Yang.
I think that's an EE.
Maybe it's an EE, I don't know. In any case, the way he, like the shopkeeper of this stand, he sometimes takes her for marketing reasons up to his counter.
Yeah.
And this is just, I love the way that when you see all these sanitized American films, you often think just the notion of touch is almost evil already, Whereas here, the way he takes her there to, promote his stuff in other cultures, like, I think that would not be possible. But I like the way this is used here. It happens so matter-of-factly that it feels very warm. in a way that would be expressed differently in films from different contexts, I think. And that's what I like about this film as well. Like, there is something specific to it.
For me, I always love stories that present multi-generational portrait, especially if it comes to one gender. So, for instance, we have 3 generations of women, basically, and they represent certain values. They have conflicts, but it's so vivid, and there's so much flesh in those differences that they have. And I immediately thought of Yi as well as a portrait of different generational values, of how sometimes we're not really on the same road as our parents, as our grandparents, etc. I also thought of Springtide by Yang Lina, a Chinese filmmaker who is also a very successful documentary filmmaker. But this film was, I think, very Yi inspired as well. In Springtide, and it's just I think, speaks so much about identity of the people, especially because there is a sense of migration in this film as well. Not multinational migration, but from city to city. They come from Taitung, which is the southeast of Taiwan, and for some reason they're getting back to get more money because it's beneficial for them to stay in Taipei and run the stall, even though it's quite difficult. Also, the story of sort of like the absence of fathers, and I think it's a quite predominant topic right now in not just Asian cinema, but it's something that just reveals the fragility of masculinity, this immature masculinity. We only get to know that there was no father, and that there are mistakes made in terms of like getting into relationship with other men, especially in the context of the second woman, in terms of like the age, the daughter. This film depicts this very poignantly in terms of how just life goes on. I mean, it's not a heavy film. There are melodramatic scenes, but they're not overtly melodramatic, which I'm always skeptical about. I'm always scared about the film just getting, a lighter tone at first, that very nice sense of playfulness, but then it starts getting darker and darker, but then it just hits with a huge wave of melodrama that just makes the film unbearable. With this, I was surprised that it didn't go this way, because it's very well balanced. There is some melodrama, there is something at stake, there is some plot twist that you can think of while watching the film, but then again, it's not over melodramatic, which I'm really grateful for the filmmaker that they managed to do it. My only concern about the film, and sort of thing that I was skeptical about, is this quite obvious sexualization of the main character. She's always nearly half naked, and I was thinking, well, is this necessary? I know that.
Oh, you mean the second or third protagonist, right? Okay.
Yeah. It's like her outfit is very sexualized. The way she moves, I think also the casting might have been because of her beauty. She's a beautiful actress and she's great at her role, but there's a lot of scenes that I felt surprised by this overtly sexualized image. Then again, it's very down to earth. I guess that would be something that would connect me with Sean Baker immediately, that sex is just used there as a part of reality. It's like Koreeda's depicting children playing and doing something like daily rituals. Sean Baker reveals sex as daily ritual, something that is very just mundane, basically.
There was something about this later plot point that I don't want to go into, that sort of this sexualization made more sense after that reveal. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's I don't want to comment more on that, but I saw it in that sense, and then it made more sense.
Yeah, there's a very functional aspect to the sexualization of this character, and part of me couldn't help but instinctively feel, of course, I haven't been into Taiwan in a really long time. I was only there briefly, maybe for 2 months studying, but it didn't really feel like the Taiwan. But of course, how could it feel like the Taiwan that I was familiar with? The Taiwanese people are so very nice. Like the idea of dysfunction in a Taiwanese family, I'm sure it exists, definitely exists. But going back to the sexualization, it also feels like this is a function for her to make money. She sells beetle nuts. People come by. In the film, it was often bikers. They chew them like nicotine, and their teeth turn red and they get stained, and they spit it all over the place.
It serves as a great contrast towards like more heavy socially driven film. I'm like terribly bored with a lot of Asian cinema stuff that are like sort of tailored towards Western gaze, where there's a lot of just like social issues, social problems just being packed in one film, then fueled through a genre narrative. And with this film, I know that this filmmaker wants to talk about her sense of longing towards Taiwan. And I felt this film is really honest. It's really well made. All those like neon lit, high saturated images, the editing, the playfulness in music. It was just like a great watch and a great way to start a festival, because I watched it near the beginning of the festival.
And, you know, to this foreignness, maybe to some members of the audience like me, there's this thing, like this aspect in the movie. I don't want to speak to exactly which character it concerns, but there is a character at some point who's at least claiming that she's pregnant. And this is the result of an outer marital affair. And the partner of the person, like the actual partner of the man with whom this character has sex, shows up at some point and says, oh, if you are pregnant and if it's going to be a boy, that is my boy. And I wonder, like, does that capture something? Does it not? Because I have never encountered that before, you know, like the idea that you can make even like the idea that was interesting to me in any case.
I think all I can say about those things is because while I was watching the film, I noticed that a lot of people were laughing alongside me. I was not laughing as much, but I also do think contextually, even though the film somewhat is reminiscent of I had just seen with both of you, the day before. And this is also a film that takes place in Taipei. And there was something that was characteristic, like as if all the characters to me felt a bit like caricatures. And that made it harder for me to be receptive to the film. But we have a lot of these things, such as the film is called Left-Handed Girl, and it also stems from the filmmaker's own left-handedness. And there's this idea that persists to a degree, but the film was also clear to show that perhaps the generation should be shifting away. But if you use your left hand, you're using the hand of the devil. Something is feeding in to this usage of the hand that should not be used at all. And the film does play with that in a very sweet way throughout the film thematically. But this whole entire additional idea that you're just speaking of the son being the most valued child, I think this is something that still exists. Even the idea that you can pay off someone very easily to just get what it is that you desire in, I don't want to say Asia, but it's not a foreign thing.
Yeah, because to me it was a thing that I have primarily heard of in the Korean context, you know, because there were also some bestsellers in recent years that discussed that, you know, in depth. So it was a bit surprising for me to see it, in that context here.
I think it all comes to the fact of Confucianism still being very present among several Asian countries, where predominant male presence is still like very big and almost essential for the family to be able to strive through decades. In Korea as well, where the oldest son is the most important figure at some point in the family, and the inability to have a person who will take over the business, who will take over all of the wealth of the family, is something very crucial for a lot of the family. So in the case of this couple that just appears at some point, I think it's crucial. I think this idea of pregnancy that just appears, I think it's a very convenient tool for many filmmakers to, you know, just rise up the stake of the whole history. I think sometimes it's too easy to do it, and I don't necessarily like it most of the times. Here, I think that the director, she's able to, you know, she's not using this for the sake of just putting the stake at a bigger level, but she's able to take out of it something so different. So it's not that I disliked it. I understand why she did it, and I think it reveals something quite interesting, what you pointed out, this Confucianism-driven element of the society that is still present. Because what you said about like this left-handedness, it's also very interesting interplay between what is understood as traditional conservative, how it can be read through like a very young generation, right? Several-year-old daughter will just use the left hand to make something evil. But it's really funny because she just steals everything with the left hand and it's just like gonna say, oh, it's not me, it's the left hand. And I loved it because it shows how conservatism can translate into something even more evil because it's not translated well. Reality is changing and so should our values. I mean, there's nothing wrong in being conservative, but you have to translate the values of older times to the modern times. Otherwise, you have that absurd situation. I think it reveals something very crucial about not just Taiwan and Taipei, but many other countries where there's this conflict of old versus new values always present. I think in film even more so because it's a very convenient contrast. But I really liked it in this film, how it's presented.
Yeah, so did I. It was well interwoven and I expected it to be more dominant, but then for a time it was absent and then it came back. It was all very smartly executed, I think. We have to move on, right? To other films because we haven't talked about other titles here. Łukasz, you have interviewed a director from Thailand. Do you want to talk us through A Useful Ghost?
Yeah.
And help us pronounce the director's name?
So we're going to talk about Useful Ghost, a film that actually won in Semaine de la Critique. It's directed by Ratchapoom Boonbunchachoke, and it's a debut film by, I think, a very talented filmmaker. He seems really interesting. His film is one of the most original Thai films from last year's. It's a comedy, like sci-fi ghost comedy where we have ghosts possessing objects like vacuum cleaners or fridge or washing machine. I actually asked Ratchapoom what would he possess, and he said that it would probably be fridge because it's like very practical and it has food, and he said he
resourceful.
Loves food. Yeah, absolutely. And he's just such a sweet guy. I mean, he's also a very funny person. It's a film that is not really too serious, but it also reveals so much about Thailand, Thai history, Thai identity. Also, I think from a very personal perspective, but at the same time, keeping a very interesting distance because it's a very like black humor fueled comedy where every actor is playing in a very stoic, very stagnant way. Is this sort of like type of acting that is quite typical for Thai comedies. But at the same time, it is also a film that deals with conservatism, especially in context of religious beliefs and Buddhism. And there's also a lot of sort of like open and overt mocking of religious beliefs and how religious system can impose certain values and way of thinking on people. And when I watched this film, of course, when you watch a Thai film, you always think of Apichatpong, whereas the Cole's films. But with this specific thing, I was just like thinking of how Apichatpong's films also incorporated like sort of like divine entities or just different entities into the realm of the living, and how he made it almost like mundane, where those ghosts, those entities just coexist with people who are alive. So that was one thing. But the other thing was that when he made Tropical Malady, there was a lot of conversation going on, especially from the Thai government, because the Thai government used to form this narrative that if you are homosexual, it's because of bad karma. So you got that very interesting belief system that would make people believe that people are gay or queer because of bad karma. And this is how you can manipulate religious beliefs in order to achieve your own political agenda. And I think in Useful Ghost, because many of the characters are queer and then they're ghosts as well, I think it makes a very interesting dialogue with that narrative that was present in Thailand quite a few years ago. But other than that, there is a lot to say about the Thai history of resistance. There's this beautiful element of the presence of ghosts in this film, that ghosts remain among the alive people as a form of resistance because they resist not to give in to death. And this is beautiful message because Thailand is the country that has the most coup d'états in the whole world. They had the biggest amount of protests. The film itself connects with the 2010 Red Massacre So there is a very, very apparent sense of reconnecting to like collective history, collective identity of that form of protest. But at the same time, the film does it in a very playful way. And I really like that, because even though not everything works in this film, I like that this filmmaker that Ratchapoom is trying to try things and incorporate them in his own way. Yeah.
Yeah, this aspect about memory and memory erasure was also so haunting. And this, idea that not only ghosts exist among the living, but that there are good and bad ghosts, which is something that I think often in the West, one thinks of a ghost as having a haunting power that's primarily negative. But in the East, there could be a neutral ghost. There could be a vacuum ghost, in this film at least. But the tension between trying to erase and then the person who tries to remember by reading was also powerful.
Yeah, and this idea of perhaps vengeance as well, right? That it's almost as if these people, like, because it's sort of set around manufactory place, it's as if the executives there, they know that their practices are bad and then that they will turn at some point against them. And when they do, they are not even surprised, they just have seen it coming all along. And of course, there's this anti-capitalist notion here as well. It has a sort of inevitable ending in a sense. As strong as the first half of the film is, I don't know if he perhaps ran out of ideas as to how to wrap it up, because the ending felt a bit as if it's from a different movie or something, especially because I think there is some tenderness, even though there is some brutality as well in the first half, but there's also tenderness and there's kindness, like the emphasis of kindness. This is all sort of discarded for a revolutionary project that ensues in the end, which seems inevitable, but it also felt a bit easy to me. But yeah, I think also what you said about Apichatpong, I think something that is understated about a cinema is how funny it is. Like when you watch an Apichatpong movie, it's incredibly funny, like very, very subtle. And I think this movie also clearly has these very offensive, humoric scenes, but it's also some scenes that just deadpan in a way that's very good.
When I talk with filmmaker, I ask a lot of political questions, and he couldn't say a lot because he was also afraid of how far he can go. But definitely the film is quite political, and they're not worried about censorship as of now, but there's a lot like bad mouthing on what is going on with Thailand on many ways. Also, one of my favorite scenes is where we have just a like an argument with monks out of nowhere at some point, and they start to curse and start to use violence, and then it's like, what the fuck is going on? It's interesting how he also plays with the image of this conservatism, that this is also a story about just standing against conservatism in its purest form, because how religion tries to control government, or even like the religious systems try to control the status quo, and how they force you to make it their way, how they want to get rid of the ghosts the way they are used to getting rid of those ghosts, and the characters just stand against it. So I also love that idea of standing against conservatism in this regard. I think also watching this back to back with Left Hand Girl, there's some elements that coexist with each other, even though the stories are completely different, the tone is completely different, but just this form of oppression, of conservative values sometimes just like loom over everything. And to me, when I watched this film, I've also felt like I'm watching something very dystopic, even though it's like it's light ghost story that is comedy. Everything seems very dystopic because of that control that is always there. That's why I think this film is also very political.
Yeah, because the whole entire plot line that at some point they want to have a baby. And in order to have a baby, they have to bend to the will of this man in power.
Yeah.
That was very dystopic. And speaking of ghosts, there was also the presence of a ghost in a film that was a debut feature in Quinzaine by Yuiga Danzuka. called Brand New Landscape. But it's my understanding as well that the Japanese title is slightly different. It's actually a combination of two words to mean something like landscape generation, but maybe you can speak a bit more to that in a second. But it's a film that rather surprised me. It's in some ways it's a family drama about a father who has no time for his children. He's an architect that is putting his career first, and at the same time he's building and is responsible for the gentrification of the Shibuya district. And the film unfolds a jump to the present where we see the impact that the two children who have grown up and now the mother is no longer there. To me, it was a bit unclear what happened to the mother. And I just like the way that the film used the city and the domestic sphere to talk about both private and public spaces and how there's some sort of something that's not right going on, some sickness, yet using those two things to unravel a story simultaneously in a very quiet way. I guess what I liked the most is that it unlocked a feeling of tension that was, I think, resolved in simply being present for me through the way that the characters navigated what they knew about one another and how they decided to be there for the others. And in the end, the filmmaker did something rather interesting to me in how I interpreted it, sort of giving back the space to the public domain and to the people who live in the city. And yeah, I don't know how you found it because I think Patrick wasn't able to see it.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
I think this film is made of two films. One is about the family and the other one is about the city. And I think I liked both of those stories, but I would like them more in a separate way. I like films about Tokyo and cities in general. Last year I curated a retrospective of Tokyo at Five Flavors. So I was like thinking, oh, this film would fit very well. But there is very interesting, I call it ghostly presence in this film. There are things that happen that are not really penetratable through logical thinking. And I like that when I don't really know what's really going on, when something is happening, but I don't really know where it comes from. Mm-hmm. So there was a very interesting thing with this object just dropping down in a certain restaurant. So there is a just uncanny moment in this film. Mm-hmm. But what's even more uncanny is that, you know, that in Cannes there was a palm dropping on a person.
Oh, no, I did not
hear about that.
So there was a random accident where a palm tree just fell down on a person.
This year,
just a couple of days ago. It was just like a very random accident. It's just like someone was walking and it just like fell down. It's just out of the sudden. The person who it fell down is the producer of this film.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So there is a very uncanny connection of ghostly presence in the film, but also the ghostly presence of Cannes. The ghost of Cannes eventually did something. But outside of that, I love the image of urban landscape. I love when the film takes us on a sort of this very flaneur kind of experience, and where just we were able to get to see the urban space through not even the gaze of the character, but just general gaze. And we were able to just appreciate the city. Tokyo is a very interesting space in itself. The main character delivers flowers to different places. And I like those characters who are put into motion. And thanks to that, we are able to get to know about the space and to see the space in its rhythm. And I had a feeling that this film had this rhythm of some of Fukada's film or Hamaguchi's films, where we have that moments where we just stay for a bit and then we're just sort of immersed in the moment. Sometimes it doesn't really push the story in any direction, but it gives another layer, another atmosphere that we can cherish for a second. So I think this young filmmaker is quite brave to be able to do it. He's like 29 or something, quite young. And I think Deserts of Namibia last year also presented a new talent. So I think it's interesting that Quinzaine was able to put a very young director 2 times in a row in their slate. I'm really curious what he's going to do next. Definitely it's a film that is very interesting. I didn't like it that much, mainly because I feel they're like 2 different projects, and I wish he could develop either of them more, maybe in the future. Who knows? I hope the ghosts will be helping him out in a different way that they're helping him now in Cannes.
Just listening to that and the presence of urban landscapes, is this comparable to something like Bas Devos' cinema, for instance?
In a sense, I didn't think of it. I love Bas Devos films, but probably more the Ghost Tropic than here. But there is something about it. Yeah, definitely. There's this seemingly nocturnal presence in the film, although most of the scenes are taking place during the daylight. But still, there is something uncanny in how he staged things, in how he appreciates this sort of distancing techniques. He uses time very well. He uses characters in the background very well. There's a lot of going on in each of the frame. He uses long shots, very slow pans. So he's definitely someone to follow in the next years.
There was a Q&A following the film, and he said it was a very personal film, and I was sort of surprised that he would be very open about some of those elements. He talked about how he had a father too that was similarly absent. So I'm curious what he'll make next.
But I could also feel that it's quite a personal story, and that it's quite personal take on familial ties, but also his relationship with the city and how those two things are interwoven in a sense. Yeah, definitely.
And as for comparison, you earlier mentioned Kōji Fukada, who was present here as well in the Première section, which is this weird outlier a bit here at the festival. Love on Trial. Kōji Fukada for me is a very interesting filmmaker. I really liked Harmonium quite a few years ago. I also liked the Venice title, Love Life. That was from 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Now, Love on Trial. Is that a film that interested you, Łukasz? Are you familiar with the entire conceit and the culture that the film depicts?
I'm really interested in idol culture. I don't know that much, but I like films that try to present the behind the scenes and how toxic the industry can be. And this film also deals with that. With this type of films, the filmmaker has to be very careful in terms of empathy, whether he's presenting something that is very oriental, exotic, and just as a curious, just like a curiosity, something like that is just weird. But Fukada never does it. So he presents a group of idol, like a music band of idol who plays J-pop songs on the concerts that are filled with lonely men in their surface. This is something very specific for Japanese context. He never reveals the background of why people are like that, why people want to go to the concerts. And so this is not the topic of the film. What he's more interested in and preoccupied with is the idea of how the team member of that band is not able to be in a relationship.
Which is a girl group in their, how old are they? 16, 17, 18?
Yeah, like below 20s or early 20s, depending on what type of band they are. I mean, last year I've seen a Korean film, Time to Be Strong, which dealt with the image of retirement of the K-pop band. Retirement in the age of 20-something, 25, for instance. So it's a great film as well. Also revealing the not so positive image of the industry and the music itself. With this case, we have sort of like a story divided in two parts. One is being a part of team member and revealing the image of what girls can do and cannot. And then the other part is like a trial film. Not Justine Triet level, but definitely something that is interesting in the context of just presenting this particular setting. Also interesting characters. And Fukada is really good with characters because he's, I think like him and Hamaguchi, they're very dialogue-oriented directors and they like to put things in motion, stage things and play around dialogue. Maybe he's not playing that much as in previous films. I think this one might be his most transparent film in terms of directing, which is ironic because I attended a screening of Floating Clouds by Mikio Naruse, the restored version, and he made a 20-minute long introduction to the film where he started with saying that Mikio Naruse was his biggest influence for his career and filmmaking style, and he compared him to other well-known directors like Ozu or Mizoguchi, saying that Naruse was the most transparent filmmaker, where his directing style was sort of like invisible. And I agree. It's a great comment on that particular filmmaker and his style. And I think with this film, I think it's the least Fukada's film. There's way less uncanniness, as for instance in Harmonium that you mentioned, which was fantastic. And also the Love Life as well. There was way more elements that made you wonder, what are you actually seeing? So this film, I think, was way more straightforward and obvious. But I genuinely enjoyed watching it from the beginning till the end.
Yeah, I felt also like there's always a flow to it. Like he knows how to transition from one part of the story to the next, and the structure is very clear here. But I couldn't help thinking that this feels like an assignment, you know, like there's something educative to it, as if we have this issue and we should deal with it from very different perspectives. And I think he manages well to capture that. But I couldn't help feeling a bit bored by the overall conceit. I don't know how you felt about that, Eliana.
Yeah, I think I liked the opening scenes. And I think the way that you just described it in terms of the empathy in which these scenes were sort of shot as if to say, this is actually reality. This is what goes on. These are fans. These are netizens come to a concert. These are the way that they orient themselves because it's a girl band. Each girl has their individual color and their merchandise.
And position, even.
Yeah, and
hierarchy.
A position and a hierarchy that's associated with and that if they are more popular, they'll be higher in the hierarchy. And there's something, I wouldn't say that I'm ever disgusted by that culture, but there's something that's always intriguing about it. But I think the idea of it sometimes is very tough for me when I understand the purity standard that these women and sometimes even men, celebrities and boy bands are held to in terms of, for this specific reason, just being in a relationship with anyone else, as if they have to preserve themselves for the imagination of their fans that will ultimately just help them and their band and the company, mainly the company, earn more profits. And that is so, it's dehumanizing in another sense, even though they're saying, no, you're promoted to an idol, to a god. But we know very well that there are incidents, which I cannot specifically talk about, of people who have decided to take their own lives, or people who have been accused of scandals. And these scandals are sometimes ranging from they smoked marijuana. This is incredible to me, or that they took ketamine in, like, especially in Korean pop culture or idol culture or celebrities. And it's devastating because it's just such a different way of understanding what the human life is supposed to be, what the entertainment system and culture, so-called values. And it's clearly, as this film in a more procedural way shows, not the actual human. It's just their worth, and the way that the companies cloak it with, no, you have to do it for the fans.
Oh, yeah.
And I do see that they give these fans, because we see some of the meet and greets, I do see how these fans, they come by and they say, oh, thank you for your encouragement. You've given me the strength and the courage to do X, Y, Z. And it's...
Yeah, and there's support beyond measure, right?
Yeah, and there's support...
People who buy 50 CDs,
etc. And obviously the extreme sort of reaction of the netizens or the fans who just, if these idols are not to the standards that they are, that's the thing that's the issue. But I don't know if you can have one without the other. Can you really sell 50 CDs and how many ever T-shirts to someone and then not have this person be upset if they're supposedly possessed by another person? And there's this extremity of jealousy and possession that we are supposed to think is not normal, is not healthy, and is rather toxic. And I don't know, because I do see that in a larger sense, what are these men who are so lonely, especially in Japanese culture? Where are they to place their desires? Is there a placement that is supposedly healthier? I mean, now we talk about AI, we talk about robots, we talk about cafes or places where people go and they don't even interact necessarily with a human, but someone who is able to give them the sort of comfort or companionship that they need. And it's disturbing on many levels because it's the aspect of being human and having human contact is being removed. And the humans that are remaining are being elevated as basically, just heavenly bodies that cannot be or should not be tarnished and that need to upkeep their image. So film-wise, again, watching it, I can't really remove myself from thinking that. But by the end of the film, I felt for this young girl who went through a journey, but I might not want to watch this film again.
Yeah, and I think a less confident filmmaker would go much more into the disturbing notion of like middle-aged men coming for these 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. But here it's rather distant, and I like that about it because, well, Łukasz said it's more of a transparent film here. These are some of the scenes that are more open, I think, for us just to make our own judgment on certain scenes. And there are some insights to it as well, right? Like, at one point, the film explores the possibility that these fans might be a threat to these young women as well, or these girls. But in the end, these fans are also the ones who protect them from other fans, where you would think, they all sign these contracts that will always provide security. It actually turns out, no, it doesn't. In these kind of circumstances, the fans might be the ones who save you, which is disturbing in itself, I think.
To follow up on what you were saying is that it shows like how double-edged the sword of collectivism is. In one way, fans are giving, and the other way, the fans are taking it away. But also, I couldn't help but feeling that the girls, they don't have agency. They are just put in a context of being a collective product, a product of society, where whether they are in a relationship or not, it's a question of whether they are faithful to collect to the mass body, which are the fans. And that was, I think, the most disturbing, but it's not dramatized. It's just for you to find out. It's like, this is it. It's like, this is the biggest stake of the film, is that there is a collective notion that looms over everything, and they're part of it. They're imprisoned in it. And if they want to be in it, they have to just follow the rules. And if there is any sort of glitch in the system, they're out, because there is no space for a mistake. And that is cruel. That is where the cruelty of this system just starts to speak. And it is interesting because this phenomenon starts as way back as the 90s, where Japan started to go through massive economic crisis, and that translated into a huge emotional, I guess, lack of generation of people who are known as the generation of lost decade. A lot of the men specifically had only money that were able to raise throughout the 70s and 80s. And then at some point, they didn't even have money. So they didn't know how to interact with people. They didn't know how to form healthy relationships. Men were absent because they were needed to work all the time. So there was no place for the role model to come up and just to show men how they should be in the society. And I think this is how this phenomenon found its consumer, because need of relationship, need of fulfilling the lack of relationship is perhaps the biggest good that could be sold. And those bands, those J-pop bands, they did it just perfectly. I didn't attend a concerts like this, but it's easy to find them in the city space in Japan. They are very interesting events. I'm not trying to judge it. I'm trying to understand it. And I think Fukada is also trying to do it. And I'm really appreciating his approach, because he's never making fun of those people. He's never trying to even show those people in the mirror of disgrace. So I think it's In a sense, I also felt it's mostly educational film. The stake is not as high as it could get. But at the same time, I felt a certain empathy coming from a filmmaker, which is, I think, probably a proof that Fukada is a very mature filmmaker. Brave in many, many aspects, but I think his other films are way more brave in terms of storytelling and experimenting of how he can stage things.
Yeah, and in the end here, coming of age means also that you stand in not just for yourself, but against the system.
Yeah, because not to open something up again, but it was interesting how early we talked just very briefly, like the sexualization of a character. And I find that in idol society, it's kind of able to make money and capitalize on the sexualization, but non-sexualization at this very same time, as if to say, we can present you with the Virgin Mary. She dances, she sings. You cannot touch her. No one else will touch her, but you can desire her. And in that soft culture way, produce a whole entire industry that can support itself, which is incredible. And then the very fact that this girl, the one who's on trial, even like there's a small scene where we see the way that she looks at these young girls dancing who also have the desire to become idols themselves. And she looks at them with such admiration. And then she sees her boyfriend, which is the reason why they have all this trouble, their liaison in the first place. And he's a street performer. And she asks him and gives him a little bit of money, token money, to perform. And he performs for her. And there's something about her look that is not the same look that she gave the idols, which I thought was good. And it made me feel also very, oh God, this is something that can't really be explained. It's going to continue. And this admiration goes beyond just her desire to possibly even be in a relationship with this man at that moment. And that speaks to the empathy that you're speaking.
Yeah, and it doesn't take the easy route with her just discarding that route, right? It's still, she's sort of suffering from being out of that band context as well. But I think we really have to move to perhaps the one title people might be looking forward to the most. This is, of course, Bi Gan's Resurrection, which was the latest addition to the fest, which also had to do with all the censorship measures that were taken in place here in order to secure that this won't be taken from the slate again at a later point. Bi Gan, obviously a very interesting filmmaker, basically has done 2 films. He made 3, but his first film was his graduation thesis, just was vanished. He made sure that no one's ever going to see that. So he made Kylie Blues, which won a prize at Locarno for the best debut. Then with the next film, Long Day's Journey into Night, he was here in the Enceinte Regard already, has this incredible last scene that takes on for quite a long time in 3D. It's an insanely ambitious movie, I think. And now we are here with Resurrection, which is not in the least less ambitious than his previous film. Łukasz, since you have seen the film twice at this point, which I cannot state for myself, could you guide us through this film? It's a very complex film as well, in a sense, no?
It is.
It's easy and complex at the same time.
Yes, it is. It is quite easy and complex at the same time, I agree. The best thing that you can do for yourself when you're watching the film is to fall into this dream, fall into this vision, and follow it as a dream. So it's okay not to understand things. It's okay to not untangle everything that is put into this film and just enjoy it. I thought about this one saying of Indian music composer Eli Raja, who is one of the biggest maestros working in the Hollywood industry down south in India. And he said that music is an art form that should take you somewhere higher and higher and higher. And I think this is what Bi Gan's film is doing. You can say it's pretentious, you can say it's shit, you can say it's just a vision that just has form but no substance. But for me, he's always trying to do something to make me go to that place, make me just lose myself. And, film takes 3 hours almost. It's quite long. It's not slow. It's his fastest film, I would say. But it was a journey. And the first screening, I felt incomplete. I felt like there's something that I can't get At the second screening, I didn't finish it because I had to leave for Kelly Reichardt, but I didn't want to leave. I always almost feel like regretting that I have to leave. And I knew what's going to be in this film, but I felt like it's such a pleasure to be in that world. I don't know, it's something that feels like being in a dream, feels like you're seeing something you haven't seen before. And it's in as much as it is a tale of someone, of a character, of a protagonist, of an entity, is also a tale through a film medium. It's a tale that reveals different perspectives of how you can tell your story, in which genre, through which archetype of story, whether is that a silent film that is set in dystopic future or here and now, or is it a neo-noir story that tells something that we've already seen before? Or there's a tale that gets its roots in religious, almost Buddhist tales that are very predominant in Chinese language cinema. And then you have very Bi Gan-esque sequence that lasts.
Kylie Blues-ish.
Yeah. I feel that this film reconnects with so much of Chinese cinema, predominant type of stories that we've seen so many times in the screen. And when I watched it for the first time, I felt that it's somewhat similar to what Wong Kar-wai wanted to do with his 2046, but here it's obviously more ambitious and more complex and more oniric, less story-driven. We have a reality where people, in order to live eternally, they stopped dreaming. But then we have those sort of people who are resisting this notion and still dream. And dream becomes a drug in itself because they lose themselves in a dream. And we have people who want to control them, wants to help them up not to lose themselves.
Yeah, I think they're called phantasmers and illusionists or something.
Yeah, the big other, I think, are the ones who are giving a hand to those who are lost in a dream. So we have one person who's lost in that sequence of dreams, and we have different dreams happening across decades. And we're traveling through different illusions of reality that are rendered through different genres of films.
With the voiceover narrative as well.
Yeah, and the voiceover of the narrative is by Shuqi, the actress who played in Millennium Mambo by Ho Xiaoxian. And there is a distinctive resemblance to this film itself because one of the sequences is set in 1999 where the end of the year happens and everybody's trying to embrace a reality that is supposed to be apocalypse. And this is an anecdote that I had after watching the film. Today, I had a dream. I didn't have any dreams throughout the whole Cannes because of how, I guess...
There was no sleep.
No sleep. I mean, there was sleep, but not enough. But after watching this film, I had a dream that there is apocalypse, that the world is ending, and that someone is attacking the world. And there was different technology that could make buildings vanish. So I was in Warsaw and someone made the Palace of Science and Culture vanish. Eliana, you was in Warsaw. You remember the place where Kinoteka is? Patrick, you've been to Warsaw?
No, I have not.
So there's a building that was built by Stalin. It's a most distinctive building in Warsaw. It's a huge tower, basically. Think of Tokyo Tower in Tokyo, for instance, or, I don't know, Eiffel Tower in Paris. So this is the building of Warsaw. And this technology that is used by people who are invading. I don't know if there were people, but this building just disappeared. And that was so uncanny to be in that dream. But yeah, this film gave me that. So I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but definitely it is an experience. A friend of mine who actually bought this film for Polish distribution, he told me that for him, it was just pure cinematic poetry. An example of a filmmaker being so deliberate, so free that he can do whatever he wants. I think we need that. We can say it's pretentious. I hate doing this, and I hate that word. I think it doesn't exist. It says nothing. But I love the fact about Bi Gan that he's always striving for something that nobody did before him. And we don't have many filmmakers like that. How long we want to wait for another Kubrick or something. And I'm not saying that Bi Gan is one, but I'm saying he has a vision. He is a visionary filmmaker of our times. And I really appreciate the fact that I could experience his film on a big screen, because that was definitely an experience.
Yeah, and these 3 films he's made so far, there seems to be an evolution in this work as well. They seem still to evolve. Like you can see he gets more mature, but there was always something to his voice that was distinct. And this now is just really, I was really impressed by this film. And Eliana, you and I, we saw this in IMAX, which was a choice, which was the right thing to do, I think. Yes. How was your experience?
I think I am a little bit, I don't know if I want to say less receptive, but I both want to see it again, but want to resist seeing it again. This, even the way that the narrative starts out with these title cards in English, which I didn't really understand why in English, which is a very picky thing to say.
No, I also found it weird that this is in English, yeah.
I wonder if there's another version that has maybe Chinese characters, maybe not. Not that that's really important, but it was curious to see the story as presented first in Roman characters. But just to say that those who dream and then those who don't, and then to just have this sequence and basically say as if you're already going to choose what journey we'll take. And to me, this idea of one who doesn't dream seems to tap into the idea of one who lives perhaps more firmly in reality. And I couldn't help but in the last sequence finally find myself sat in the film, not feeling at all the almost 3 hours that had gone by, and almost being faced with this question that obviously comes up from time to time, where a film makes you think, what is cinema? What am I doing in cinemas? What am I doing watching films? And there was something there that not many films elicit, but this one did. Just, you talked earlier about how you feel like a lot of films at Cannes this year were a bit bleak, maybe even nihilistic. And this film is on the border of doing that for me, because it's raising the question, but it's not answering it. Or is it answering it? I don't know. Maybe you think it is answering the question in its final sequence. I don't know how much in detail we'll talk about that. But
But I guess who can just say the last scene speaks to the title of the movie.
Yes. In some sense, yeah, because they were playing with the theme of the candles, and then we have a whole entire wax sequence that mirrors how we are in an audience. And there's this glow and eventual melting, which is what the poster suggests as well.
Yeah, and of course, we have all these different periods of cinema, right? And so cinema invents itself again and again, and with it, its audience as well.
But it just, something I still need to sleep on it, maybe dream on it, maybe watch it again. But it hurts in a way for me too, which is what I took it as, this larger existential question of, what am I doing in theaters, watching films? Is this my dream? Is this my life? Should I stick to one side or the other? And I think that there is no answer to that, but it made me feel uneasy.
Yeah, and I like what you say, because there's this symbolism in the movie of these sort of projectionists who become these movie monsters. That's also what Bi Gan has called it. And they sort of have this bent body, and they become these creatures and
golems.
Yeah, sort of. And at some point, the back is cracked up, and you can see that the price it takes, the price it takes them to create. Also with the people who watch, right? Because they are the ones who age. Those who don't watch, those who don't dream, they don't age. But is it really worth doing what they are doing? And there's such a beauty about the ephemerality of it all. These days, I don't just like meta fiction, but I like when a film has a vision of how we see a movie. I like how this film puts us into a position of active viewing. There's often this tension between immersion and disruption of immersion, almost like to suggest what we lose when we immerse ourselves into the scene, but also how easily we are sucked into it again. And there is this ongoing threat about, one of the most famous MacGuffins in cinema, the suitcase, right, which appears again and again. and we want to know what is in the suitcase. And often there is, when a suitcase is opened in this film, there's a mirror in it as well, which, you know, displays our relationship to how we engage with storytelling. In the end, we see our desire for storytelling and film as well. And I think there are all these love letters to films that I hate, you know, and this film makes it so much more intriguing and so much more unique. And so many films are lazy about this, you know, you just think it's enough to evoke a generic love for cinema, and the silver screen and the projectionist. And this is also glorified. It's really, he finds his own form. He finds an own way of storytelling, and I found it was quite beautiful.
I also think he finds his own unique aesthetics to do it, because this film looks like nothing I've seen for a while now, especially the first sequence that was a silent film basically. But to follow up on that, on the form in itself, there is this sentence, I had it written down in my notebook, is all that has form is an illusion. And I think it encapsulates what he's trying to do in terms of what film it really is because we are so used to form, we're so used to trying to understand things, that when we getting something more elusive, it's out of hand. But what it really means is that everything that has form is really an illusion. Sometimes it's just losing its origin, losing its core, that the film stopped being a film. I think that Resurrection starts with a scene where we have a group of people being in a cinema and they're just chased away by the police. And I felt with friends we were talking about this film how it wasn't censored, because there is an apparent vision of the state controlling people and just getting rid of the people in the cinema. And the end of the film is that we see glowing phantoms.
Oh yeah, and we had this film, Only the River Flows, right, from two years ago, where a theater became a police headquarters, basically.
Yeah. I had a feeling that he's very similar to the protagonist of Wei Shijun's film.
Yeah, I think we all feel positive about this film.
There is one film critic wandering around looking for someone who shares his cinephilia, and they did not like this film, and they did not like Sirat. So, if anyone knows, please write to us. Maybe we can pair you up.
Those are the two standout films for me, this competition. And I made this joke earlier that Bi Gan resurrected the Cannes competition for me, which for a long stretch of the festival was quite a disappointment, but it was well framed by Sirat and this at the end. I leave the festival with overall positive feelings now, for sure.
And you will try to see it tomorrow, is that correct?
I will try to catch it again, yeah.
All right.
Yes, so in the end, thank you so much for being here, Łukasz.
Thank you for having me. As always, I hope it becomes a tradition that we can discuss Asian cinema in conversations.
Yes.
I hope so.
Yes.
So long. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.